Yeah.
Okay, so to continue from last week, we want to wrap up our segment for part of your solution in Module 2 is preparation of install media, especially with an interest to automate and streamline installations. And one of the worst things that happen, as we discussed before, is that when you have a version of Windows that you downloaded some time ago, and this was in January of 2020, it was updated in September of 2019. It is the 199.664 install image from the Microsoft website. When we use this to install for systems now in 2021 of March, right? There's all these updates that have to be embedded inside that ISO, or every time we install with this install media, each one of our new systems has to download 2 years of updates, and that's just terrible. It's better to slipstream. So the term we're looking for here, when you're talking about preloading the updates to the image using a tool called DISM, that's called slipstreaming. And that's one thing we're going to take a look at. And then we're also going to look at the reference that's in your textbook about Sysprep, use of Sysprep. And so what we want to do is, that's going to be our most important focus today, is to help you understand how to take a shortcut with an ISO so that those things are preloaded. And then once you have, whether you have a newly reset system or you have a system that's built with a recovery disk that includes those things, if you want to roll that out and mass produce that kind of like a photocopy machine. So you have a clean slate, you want to roll out the same image to 100 different desktops. You can use the digital equivalent of a photocopy machine for system installs. It's called Sysprep, and what it'll do is break down an installation and generalize it so that you can roll it out in high and fast numbers across a network. One of the things that's important to understand is that whether you use a thumb drive, a USB, or an external hard drive, or you use a network service, if you're using a network service on a local area network, you want to set up PXE. It's called PXE. Everybody say PXE with me. You're going to, yeah, you're going to implement PXE service, network service requirements on the system that you use, typically on the WDS, Windows Deployment Server. And we're going to show you how to set up Windows Deployment Server using the GUI. So in terms of streamlining and automating install methods, of course, and I'm just dipping back a little bit, we talked about how graphical user interfaces could be used to connect and manage systems, to see what status they are, to see if they need any updates. And so we can use this Windows Admin Center to connect to, or we can use the remote desktop connection to basically RSAT, Remote Server Administration Tool, the first thing that we set up to establish the roles for that system. So we're going to cover quite a bit today, but we'll start by finishing our media prep. We showed you how to create a recovery disk, and I wanted to show you what happens when you get to the end of that process. You basically get a setup that looks something, let's see, where's the, I think it's in here. Yes. Final result of the, so as we left our class last Thursday, I was building a recovery disk that included all of the updates from the recent set of fixes and patches and so on. And I had to have a 16 gig thumb drive. It wouldn't use an 8 gig thumb drive, but it basically created this USB using the menu option. And Raheem's joining us now. Using the menu option off of the start button for system recovery, you can select create a recovery disk. And what it does is extract the contents of the WinSXS directory and then builds this USB. And as you go inside, you find out that it takes up about 7.5 gigabytes of space. And you can use that to install Windows at that point. So you boot from the USB drive. One of the things that happens when you try to boot from a USB, in recent years, Windows and other operating systems have added additional measures for security reasons where you have to press extra keys. And this last week I discovered on my Lenovo that I couldn't get this thing to boot into a USB drive. I had to press the shift key while it's shutting down in order to access the BIOS menu. There's different tricks for different brands, but I just thought I would mention that while we're in here. I did want to take a moment though to work a different install setup on a USB today. And I wanted to use a tool that's actually pretty easy to use. And I wanted to, did we talk about Yumi?
Yeah, we did last time.
We did. Okay, so this is Yumi, and it's created by Pendrive Linux. And did I demonstrate this?
Yeah.
I thought we demonstrated.
Yeah, you did.
Did I build a whole setup disk?
I don't remember you building one, but I remember you like showing us the software.
Yeah, I think I started the process, but I don't think I finished it.
Yeah.
One thing that's really cool about this, and I want to show you, I'm going to go ahead and attach my thumb drive. I actually created a multi-boot USB using Yumi. And but I'm going to go back to this screen, and I'm going to right click and run as admin. Right now I have Kali Linux on this machine, on this, and usually what happens is that it's going to ask you, do you want to install other operating systems or other boot partitions on this thumb drive while you're creating it. I don't know if it's going to give me the option to just add Windows to the existing thumb drive, or if I have to kind of wipe it all together. But I'll go ahead and select this, and then I'll format it FAT32. If I wanted to wipe it clean and get rid of something that was already in there, I could check this box. I think in the interest of keeping it simple, we're going to do that. We'll select a Windows distribution. So we're going to scroll down until we find Windows. Oh, Windows Defender offline. So you notice there's a couple of options here. This PE, this is pre-executable. I was talking about Pixie before. So this lets you set up an install image with a bootable menu. That's one way to do this. Windows to go, you can basically set up your thumb drive so it runs off of the USB natively. And those are the pre-configured options here with Yumi. Plenty of other boot manager options out on the internet that you can use for this. But I really like Pendrive Linux because of its flexibility. Any questions about this?
And so far.
Okay. What I'd like to do now is take a moment to look at DISM. So we said basically that there's this way of preloading updates into an image. It's called slipstreaming. You can use DISM. You can also use DISM to preload new versions of Windows entirely into the install media. So what am I saying? You basically have the new, so whenever you have a whole new version of Windows, that's called a feature update. When you see Windows feature update for server or for Windows 10, it's actually a whole new kernel. It's a whole new operating system. And these are stored in cab files. And as you see here, it says, from time to time, Microsoft redistributes Windows updates and other software system and first-party software in cab files. The problem is you don't get to install by double-clicking on the cab files, right? So DISM or Dism is a very capable tool, and basically there's plenty of YouTubes out here on how to use it. But essentially, you can take drivers. So one of the things you can do is you can preload drivers into a Windows install so that you don't have to download drivers for your video card, download drivers for your wireless network adapter, download drivers so that your mouse works when you install. Those are things you can pre-package or slipstream using DISM, right? But you can also create what's called a Windows installation media image. So it's a WIM file. And it's similar to an ISO. And basically that WIM file is used on Windows Deployment Server to push out installs of the operating system. So the thing that I want you to understand is that DISM is the tool you use to inject or preload or slipstream updates, drivers, even whole new feature updates, whole new versions of the Windows operating system into an ISO. Okay, and there's a whole series of creative. So this is a 1-minute video, I think, right? To apply a Windows image it shows you how to use DISM to install Windows on a system. So you can update the image and then you can use DISM to install that image on the system directly instead of having to run a startup process, right? So let's just take a quick look at a 1-minute view of how powerful DISM is. And hope that this thing plays all right. Can everybody see this?
Yeah.
And is it here? Is this audio coming through okay?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Not now.
So it's a kind of annoying music, but essentially what's happening here is that there's a variety of installation versions or images for different types of Windows install, server and so on. And you can basically build this thing and then kick it off and then actually use it to install Windows on the spot. You can basically point it at whatever image you want. It's very flexible. It's very straightforward and easy to use. So here you see Windows 10 Education, Windows 10 Enterprise, Windows 10 Pro. You know, you could basically have a server with all these install images, and then you can just pivot and shoot. You're basically picking and choosing and then applying which ones you want to install. So the thing that I want you to remember for your module assessment is that DISM, which is Deployment Image Servicing and Management Tool. Deployment Image Servicing and Management Tool. DISM allows you to update and to modify the install image conveniently for automated deployment, right? So you don't have to update every single thing that comes out just because media you have is from September 2019. I don't want to load 18 months of updates. Cumulative update for October 2019, November 2019, December 2019. Oh my gosh, that's 300, 400 megabytes per load, right? Moving right along, in your textbook, there's also additional information, separate method. It talks about Rufus. I think we showed you Rufus before. Walks through the process of building a USB thumb drive using Rufus, and then running the installer by booting from a USB. That's not the part that we want to spend time on. The part that we want to spend time on in your textbook today, and after we get back to roles and features here, we want to talk about Sysprep. You can use PowerShell to install a feature, so you can basically add a DNS server, or you can add file services. So instead of using the Windows Admin Center to set up certain features and functionality, you can use PowerShell. It's very simple. So here it's talking about using the telnet get Windows feature, name tel, and then add Windows feature telnet client, and then you get this. I'm going to try to demonstrate this for you directly on the system we have here. So we're going to go to, can everybody see my screen?
Yeah.
So I'm going to exit to the command line and then enter PowerShell. And I think the command was get Windows feature -name. I'll actually so there's Telnet client. And so the first part of this process is to identify the feature that you want and get it, and then use it. So we're going to add the Windows feature, Telnet client, Telnet-client. So I notice on my screen, the name is Telnet-client, but the display name is Telnet client. I'm going to go ahead and add -Windows feature, Telnet-client. Space. Did I have to put name in there? No. I used name here before. Should be good to go. So it's installing. It's taking a while. We'll check back on that in just a second. Centralized management. So when we talk about server management, of course, you're going to see that there's a lot in the study guide and in your assessment on server, remote server administration tool and server manager, and of course, Windows Admin Center. So you did still need to install this in order to be able to work some of the graphical changes. So enabling server rollouts with Sysprep. So once you have a server that you really like, if I wanted to duplicate the server I've just created and I've built here. So now I have a Telnet client on my server. If I repeat, can everybody see the difference here?
Yeah.
Okay, so it runs, it works, it says it's true, it's a success. Then when I repeat the same command, if there's an X there, it means it's installed, right? Okay, so Sysprep. Instead of having to go through all the steps to keep working over and over again with the same media, installing the disks or the USB and doing it manually, you can use Windows Deployment Server across the network, or you can use System Center management. So SCCM is the other method, the other option besides Windows Deployment System. There's SCCM. And SCCM stands for Well, they keep changing it. Now they call it Endpoint Manager, but before it was SCCM. Could be this, could be for Surface tablets and portable devices endpoint. But System Center Configuration Manager is really, so there's a huge huge commitment to cost and expense, but basically once you set up SCCM, WDS is the free version. This is one thing I want you to understand. So you can set up WDS and automate your installs and use Sysprep that way. But if you really want just a point and click interface to roll it out with a few, hundreds of systems are updated or hundreds of systems are installed with just a few mouse clicks, it's really the System Center Configuration Manager that you want. And it is expensive, but it's their corporate or enterprise version for how to automate installations, right? And it's been around a long time. So it is an endpoint manager hasn't been around for very long. It has more to do with mobile devices and Internet of Things. So in any case, so Sysprep is basically going to take and create a master image of your system by generalizing your image. What do we mean by generalizing? I did this. I created a work group called VI SERP, and I changed my computer name to STD SRV1. And I added a local administrator called Spare. And I've enabled remote management. I have a lot of other settings, a specific IP address. Does anyone know what happens? All right, so what would happen if I just took a copy of this and I started pushing it out onto hardware platforms? Would it come up with the same network settings or different network settings?
I would say this. I would say the same.
Yeah, it would. It would come out with the same. So the idea of copying a hard disk is not that hard, right? You can do that with a Linux distribution and a thumb drive. You can walk up to any machine, a server in a data center, a laptop at your friend's house, a game console. You can boot into that thing from the USB thumb drive, and you can capture the entire disk. Just copy the whole hard disk. And what does that mean in terms of using it 100 times elsewhere? Well, if you have similar hardware platforms, you could just copy it onto the hard disk, right? Couldn't you use the same procedure and say, okay, I'm going to boot into Linux and I'm going to use the DD command in Linux and I'm going to push that boot partition from that other machine onto 100 different platforms, because I don't want to pay for licensing and I just want to make my life easy. Well, it's not going to make life easy. What's going to happen is that 100 different systems for the same work group with the same name and the same exact accounts are going to show up, and here's the problem, with the same computer account and, what's worse, the same IP address. So what do you think happens when they come up on those platforms and start connecting to the network? Armageddon.
Yes.
What Sysprep does is it takes all of the love and care that you put into building an ideal system. And yeah, you had to make changes so that you could log in, you could manage it while you were working on it, while you were preparing it and configuring it. You wanted to give it a special name. You wanted to set it aside from other machines by using a static network address. You wanted to do all of these things to get it just right. But once you're ready to duplicate it, it's going to generalize. When we say create a master image, what we're really saying is we're going to capture everything except the custom criteria. A master image does not include the workgroup name. It'll default back to just plain workgroup. The computer name will be some randomized value. It's just going to come up with some gibberish there. And it's going to change the network settings so that it uses DHCP to connect with an automatically assigned network address. So anything that you did in terms of the custom configuration and for the name and the network address, that's going to be stripped out of it. But the roles, the telnet client that we just installed, if we set up a DNS server, right? If we say, okay, I want to add a DNS server to this. Did we ever demonstrate adding a DNS server to this? I can't remember.
No, neither can I.
Okay, so we added a feature using PowerShell just now, but let's yeah. So if you want to clone your master server, then you run Sysprep. So here are the steps, right? And basically what we want you to do is to walk through these tasks with your machine. All of you have created a machine, yes? Please say yes.
Yes, of course.
Okay. All right. And all of you have kept it up to date, haven't you? Faithfully?
Yep.
Run the Windows update, right? Download and update your stuff, right? Okay. So you run Sysprep to prepare and shut down the master server, and then you create your master image of the drive. Okay. And then you build new servers using copies of the master image. So Sysprep is going to create this master image of the drive, and here's what it's going to do. It's going to generalize everything on that system, like we just said, and then it's going to power it off. And then you use WDS or SCCM to capture that disk. So it's going to know WDS or SCCM after you run Sysprep. It's going to know, hey, I've got a master image that's been generalized. And so it will create that master image from what Sysprep generates. And then from the WDS server or the SCCM server, it'll build the new servers. So once again, Sysprep takes all the special custom stuff out and shuts it down. And then these other tools will create that master image and then use that master image to stamp it out. So when those servers come up, they will not have the name, they will not have the IP address, right? And that's important.